You see the headlines all the time, right? Military drills in the Taiwan Strait, tense diplomatic standoffs. Our eyes are always drawn to the warships and the jets. But what if the real reason for all this tension isn't on the high seas, but deep inside China itself? Let's dig into that.
Look, this kind of tough talk isn't new. This quote from Deng Xiaoping, right before China went to war with Vietnam in 1979, has that same hardline feel as today's wolf warrior diplomats. It shows a long history of using outside force to send a message back home, a message of absolute, unshakable strength. But, and this is the key, what if we're reading it all wrong? The common take is that this aggression comes from a place of pure confidence. But if you look closer, the evidence points to something else entirely, that this tough exterior is actually a shield for some serious vulnerabilities at home. So that's the big question we're asking here. What if all this focus on Taiwan is, in a way, a giant magic trick, a strategy to keep the world's eyes, and more importantly, the Chinese people's eyes, fixed on the horizon, so nobody notices the real storm brewing right at home? Okay, so to really get this, we have to look at what's been propping up the Chinese Communist Party's power for the last 40 years, its economic promise. For generations, this was the bedrock of its entire claim to rule. For decades, the party had this kind of unwritten deal with its people. Political scientists call it performance legitimacy. The deal was simple. You stay out of politics, and we deliver an economy that makes you richer every year. But now that that economic miracle is slowing down, a new deal is on the table. It's based on nationalist legitimacy, a promise not of a bigger wallet, but of national pride, of strength, and of restoring China's place in the world. And the engine for all that growth? Real estate. Man, it was a gold rush, at one point making up almost a quarter of China's entire economy. Millions of regular people poured their life savings into property, convinced it was the one investment that could never, ever fail. Well, that engine has totally stalled out. And the scale of this problem is just mind-boggling. That property boom swelled into a $52 trillion bubble. It just got too big to work anymore. Now you have millions of empty apartments and giant developers going bankrupt. The very foundation of that "will make you rich" promise, it's cracking. The promise has been broken. So think about it. If you're a government and you can't promise ever-increasing wealth anymore, what do you promise instead? You pivot. You change the whole game. And that's exactly what the CCP has done, shifting from an economic playbook to a political one. And the playbook for this new strategy is something called the holistic national security concept. This is so important to understand. What it does is officially state that political security, meaning keeping the party in power, is the #1 absolute priority. And it totally erases the line between a threat inside the country, like a protester, and a threat outside the country. To the party, they're now seen as the exact same enemy. And here's how they use it. This doctrine lets the government take any problem at home, a bad economy, high youth unemployment, public anger, and just relabel it. Suddenly, it's not a government failure anymore. No, it's an attack orchestrated by hostile foreign forces, and Taiwan is the perfect, always available symbol of that threat. This leads to this really fascinating and frankly dangerous dynamic where crises aren't just problems to be solved. They're actually politically useful. The party has learned how to take public fear and anger and turn it into fuel for the regime. You know, there's actually a classic name for this in political science: diversionary war theory. The idea is super simple. When you've got a lot of problems at home, you create or hype up a crisis with a foreign country. It distracts everyone, unites the nation against a common enemy, and makes the leader look strong. We can actually see it as a cycle. First, an internal crisis pops up, say the property market implodes. Second, the leadership creates a diversion outside, ramping up military drills and tough talk about Taiwan. Third, state media blasts out a nationalist story blaming everything on those hostile foreign forces. Fourth, you get this rally around the flag effect where people's anger is pointed outward and support for the government goes up for a little while. But here's the catch, the really dangerous part. That rally effect, it wears off. And to get the same boost next time, you have to up the ante. The cycle demands things get bigger and scarier. And that constant need to raise the stakes, well, that leads us to the end game. And it's a dangerous one. It's a situation where a government can literally become a prisoner of the very nationalism it created. Experts call this the nationalism trap. It's what happens when you get so good at stoking the fires of national pride that you create an audience at home that demands aggression.
At that point, you can't back down. You can't compromise. Why? Not because you'll look weak to another country, but because you'll look weak to your own people. You're trapped by your own tough talk.
And this isn't just a theory. Look at this quote. It shows that the whole wolf warrior thing is genuinely popular back home. There's now a built-in audience that has been taught to see anything other than total confrontation as being submissive. That's the crowd the government has to please now, and it really limits their options.
So at the end of the day, while we're all watching the warships and jets in the Taiwan Strait, the bigger danger might just be the political firestorm that Beijing has whipped up inside its own country. By swapping its source of power from economic growth to nationalist pride, the party has painted itself into a corner. Backing down could risk its very survival. And that leaves us with one deeply troubling question. Has Beijing started a fire that it can no longer control?